your aura goes numb. That means your body, the plasma field that is you, cannot unpack through it. That means this is the opposite of life. It prevents life from existing. It's called misqualified energy because it's not phase conjugate. So we all knew we wanted to build from organic materials, but now I can go to a biophysicist and explain why.
And what materials would you recommend?
Well, obviously,
the ones we know we don't. What do we do?
Let me give the classic example. So Phil Callahan was a radio engineer in Wales, and he noticed that in the houses on the seacoast, the people inside were all living to be 110 years old. How did they get to be 110 years old? All the people in the whole town were 110 years old. How come they lived so long? He scratches it, and then he goes into one of their houses, and his hair stands up. I've been there. It actually was in Transylvania recently. And it was a hemp. The house was made of hemp, which is very phase conjugate DNA. And then this mist would come in from the sea every day, and it would have the trace mineral, would get baked on the straw, and this was a fabulous biologic capacitor. This, I tell you, is an immortal house. Okay.
So straw bale houses are fabulous.
Would be a good start, yes. You need to get the electrosmog out. You need the trace material. The trace mineral is sprayed on living seawater, baked in the sun. You've got yourself a fabulous biologic capacitor. Now, in practice, there are hundreds of kinds of biologic materials that are used for living architecture. The principle is the definition of the sacred space is the place where the most number of waves can converge non-destructively. So this is the place that you're going to have bliss best, where the waves are compressing fractally. This is the place where a capacitor will have the most harmonics in its spectrum analysis. And recently, my hero, Professor Karakov, he went, I think it was the Kobe, and he said, show me the place. You know, there's this latest article in Biologic Architecture that African villages are actually fractal. It's really true. It's been documented. And
a good TED talk.
Yeah, was it in the TED series? Yes, yes. TED equals something. And the place where you go to talk to your ancestors is the place in the village that's actually fractal. And guess what? Karakov went there with his spectrum analyzer hooked to his capacitor, the GBB, and he proved it. He measured the fractality in air at the place where they could talk to their ancestors, and it worked. It's so cool. Sacred space is actually simply the place where waves agree. Non-destructive compression. Definition of fractal and sacred. And peacemaking. Thank you. One more question. Okay.
I just want to know what you feel that's going on with orbs and what you think.
She knew that I prepared a slide about that. All right. You were reading my mind. You see, the plasma fields around your body, here's orb of life. If you actually investigate the orbs, this is a, do you see a twinkle in my eye? If you zoom in on the orbs, they happen around biological material, which are fractal and phase conjugated. And when that's, like if you have a barn full of old logs, and then you have a high shutter speed on your digital camera, you're much more likely to see orbs. The orbs are actually a phase conjugate plasma domain trying to sustain life. And the only way they can self-organize is by getting phase conjugate or fractal. That's why they will generally be dodeca-icosa in symmetry. Okay, so if we actually investigate their symmetry, here's pictures. Do you see the geometry? Their geometry is this, literally. And there's a reason for that. It's the only way they can sustain life. So there's something called rod theory. You take same kind of photographs of leaking power transformers, you'll see these little plasma domes, incubus, succubus. Everything wants to be alive or dead. In order to get alive, it has to get fractal. So it always does the dodeca-icosa dance. You know, here you got the cover of Nature magazine saying the universe is dodecahedral. Here's the cover of New Scientist magazine saying the universe is fractal. Neither one realizes the dodeca is the perfect fractal, and neither one realizes that's the cause of gravity. That's and that's what's holding the plasma, the orbs together.
I had some photographs taken, and I had a flash of light, and when I was in Mexico, the violet light that came across Kukulkan and had sacred writings in it. It looked like pixel. I actually had a picture of my crystal skull, and the same thing happened, and it was actually, I've got writings also within the light. I haven't seen many around at
That's
that
right.
level.
Yes.
So,
Well, the writing in the light is the fact that the plasma domains in the light are called plasma residues. And that's the new physics word for alphabet letters. So this shaman in Australia, who now is co-authoring all the papers with Los Alamos Laboratory, named John McGovern, our friend there, he can, you know John, yeah. He can read almost every petroglyph on planet Earth because he knows the alphabet. This alphabet of light, it's like you ask the ancient rune master, what was the origin of the runes? He says the origin of the rune is the, quote, way in to the mind of the ancient shaman. Now what is mind? Mind is that which holds this plasma domain together. When you make this phase conjugate array in your brain waves, you create a little implosion for charge. And at the center of that, there will be perception. That's called mind. And the symmetry elements that hold that together is that alphabet. Simple example, you won't see a rainbow if the air is not fractal. You won't see the green flash on the ocean if the air is not fractal. Yeah? So the universe is always trying to tell you the elements of the symmetry that's holding that mind together. Then you wake up like Dr. Buck after he wrote his book Cosmic Consciousness. And he thought, the whole universe is alive. How did it get that way? By being fractal. Yes?
Does sound play a part?
Well, as we saw, when you spectrum analyze Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, you actually make the letters of those ancient alphabets as a sonic hologram. So clearly, the index to that way in which DNA is programmed. The simplest example I can think of is when we did that study to show the effect of love on DNA, we measured the fact that coherence in your heart causes DNA to braid. So here is, where's that study here? That DNA braiding is actually controlled by sound. So when you feel love, your DNA, your heart makes coherent harmonics. And your DNA is like a helix absorbing that charge. I lost the slide. And the percent to which your DNA can receive the energy of love, it receives it by braiding. This isn't the slide I was looking for. But your DNA is a helix. And the helix goes, and then the thread is braided again into rope. And then the rope is braided again into fat rope. And the seventh time that happens, your DNA pelastrate turns inside out and becomes a Torah stone. It's called the seventh sign, the seventh seal, the seventh veil. And then you have this ring in your DNA. So the mechanics that allows your DNA to absorb that charge is called piezoelectric. And if the music is phase coherent to that DNA, then your DNA says ring and braid, and it receives that inertia and implodes. And so you drive that implosion with the coherent music, and eventually your DNA starts being able to drive that charge right through its own center.
and that's when you'll be able to see visions and the angels will appear.
You have the physics of bliss in your blood, actually. So what's happening at the core of your DNA, compression is becoming acceleration, remember the 10 spirals, and that's how your DNA is making gravity, and that's measurable. And then that's when you turn on what we call DNA radio, which is phase conjugation in your DNA. It's the physics of the collective unconscious. And your ability to tune into that is limited by how much bliss you can handle. Yes?
Eugene Carter demonstrated that producing what he calls pure sound in a wooden timber frame building was producing very bright, clear orbs. Some of them moving very fast, some of them sheets of plasma.
Right.
And I saw this myself on the digital camera.
That's great. Yes.
Absolutely.
So if we define that process electrically, we see the environment became more phase conjugate, which enabled charge to be distributed efficiently. In liquids, it's called redox potential, or fractality. So fractality in liquid or air predicts how much life can exist. So now we have the technology to measure what air can make life. When you live in dead air too long, life goes away. So the reason you can't have bliss in air-conditioned air is because the metal fins in the air conditioner depleted the capacitance of the air. Yeah? And then charge is not distributable. Efficient distribution of charge defines life. And that's why you need that for bliss. Live air. Pine tree needles make braided air fractal. We could go on forever, but it's getting late.